Welcome to Hampton Bay Stories. These stories are based on the Hampton Bay book series by Denise Nichols. If you enjoy this series, we invite you to subscribe to our channel or check out our books on your favorite online book retailer. This story is called Cherry on Top. It is the prequel to the book titled Storm Surge by Denise Nichols. The sun had barely risen above the tree line, but the heat already pressed down like a hand on the back of the neck, sealing Van's word with tired resolve in the administrative offices of Bayou State College. The building smelled of dust, old carpet, and something damp that no one could identify anymore. Cristobal Broussard arrived at 7:03 a.m., his usual time, not because he was disciplined, but because it gave him the illusion of dominion. He walked with a precise, fluid arrogance, freshly shined shoes, tailored navy blazer, and a smirk that suggested he'd already won whatever game you didn't know you were playing. He paused at the front desk, where Cherry was already seated, typing up purchase requests for broken air conditioners that maintenance hadn't touched in weeks. Her hair was pulled back. Crisp plus. No makeup today. She didn't look up. Cherry, Cristobal purred. That blouse makes you look competent. She paused mid, keystroke, swallowed a reply, and kept typing. That was how the dance went. He'd make a comment, a grazing insult hidden inside a compliment. She'd pretend it hadn't happened. But today, something in her stillness was sharper. Cristobal didn't notice. He leaned closer across the desk, his cologne pressing into the air like an unwanted guest. Remind me to schedule interviews for the new IT coordinator. Make sure we get someone cooperative this time. He lingered. She didn't flinch, just nodded once, briskly. Of course. Behind them, the hallway lights flickered. The ceiling tiles were water-stained. A dead roach lay under the vending machine. Dean Ritter passed by, gripping his coffee like a lifeline. He saw Cristobal leaning over Cherry and gave a sharp nod, acknowledgement, not approval. Cristobal gave a little mock salute. Ritter, how's the world of tenured indifference treating you? Ritter didn't answer. He ducked into the faculty wing. He'd heard the rumors, everyone had, but Cristobal was insulated. The president liked him, or more accurately, couldn't be bothered to question him. Later that morning, in the HR office, the director sat alone, reading an anonymous email that had come in through the whistleblower portal. No name, no direct accusations. Just a date, a location, and a question. How many more until someone notices? The HR director, Daisy Gordon, closed the laptop slowly. She looked out the window toward the quad, where students were arriving for orientation week. Laughing, bright-eyed, oblivious. She reached for a yellow legal pad and began a list. Maintenance shift change. Check roster. Review Cristobal's hiring files. Look into Cherry. Outside, a golf cart sputtered by, carrying the college president. He was wearing aviators, texting, and sipping a Bloody Mary. He didn't look up. That night, Cherry sat at the kitchen table with Mike. She slid a small voice recorder across to him. I got his comments to Thomas this morning. He told him to bend the rules on procurement or find another job. Mike stared at her. Are you sure you want to do this? Cherry nodded. I'm already doing it. He reached out and took her hand. The kitchen was quiet, but from the open window came the dull roar of crickets and something else, something subtle, just under the surface. Like the storm hadn't started yet, but the air knew it was coming. It was nearing the end of summer. By 4 o'clock, the heat had settled into the concrete like a curse. The sun burned low through the fogged windows of Dean Ritter's office. His blinds were half drawn, casting striped shadows across the floor, and the framed family photo on his desk, his wife, long gone now, smiling in a way she hadn't in the last year of her life. Dean Ritter ran a hand through his thinning hair and stared at the edge of his desk, where a red paperclip sat by itself. His thoughts were not on budgets or curriculum. They were on Cherry. They had always been close, but she had barely spoken in this morning's admin meeting. He interpreted her silence had the weight of something loading, like the chambering of a round, and Cristobal had noticed. He always noticed everything Cherry said or did. She was a strong woman who worked her way up from a student assistant to assistant director. She had attended Bayou State College for an BA and graduate degree. She was ambitious, and those types or females made the best prey. There was a knock on Ritter's door. It was soft and deliberate. Ritter already knew who it was. The Vice President of Student Affairs, Cristobal Broussard, slipped in without waiting to be invited. He closed the door gently behind him. The Vice President didn't speak at first. He walked slowly around the room, examining a painting on the wall of the old quad, back when the buildings weren't peeling paint like sunburned skin. He tapped the frame with a knuckle. "Funny thing about institutions, Ritter," Cristobal said, still facing the painting. "They age. They decay. Unless you keep the decay in check." Ritter didn't reply. His jaw tightened slightly. He thought it ironic that Broussard had said such a thing. He was doing nothing to stop the rapid decline of the century-old college. Cristobal turned, with his hands in his pockets. "You and I, been in this game for a while. We have survived presidents, budget cuts, even that faculty revolt a few years back. But you know what really rots a place?" He stepped closer, his smile widening, and he leaned down to whisper in Ritter's ear unspoken debts. There it was. Ritter's breath hitched barely, but Cristobal caught it. Cristobal placed his hand against the edge of the desk, inches from the red paperclip. 5 years ago, there were untraceable budget discrepancy in student services. $42,000 moved through a vendor account, logged under temporary housing allocations. That rang a bell. He had spotted the issues when it happened, but he did not act. He cataloged the issue as he always did to use when he needed an unwilling ally. Ritter had mentored Cherry all through college. He too recognized her ambition and talent, but he squandered that passion behind a desk and in meetings. Ritter went very still. Cristobal's voice lowered. It was all velvet and venom. "Your wife, God rest her soul. She lost her coverage when she left her job. Chemotherapy isn't cheap, is it?" "You don't," Ritter began, but Cristobal cut him off. "I do. I've seen the altered audit logs. And I've seen how careful you were to spread the withdrawals across 3 months. Just enough to seem like attrition. But you never paid it back, Dan. You meant to, but she got worse, didn't she?" Cristobal leaned in, eyes sharp. "Now I'm not a cruel man. I get it. Love makes us do inconvenient things. But here's the thing, Ritter. That woman, Cherry, she's becoming inconvenient too. Asking around. Looking through old HR forms. She is stealth, but not stealth enough. I have eyes and ears everywhere." Broussard straightened and smoothed the front of his jacket. "You know what I want?" Ritter shook his head slowly. "I need you to be a reminder. She needs to mind her business and be a bit more cooperative. Just a nudge. Nothing overt. Just enough to keep things calm. You know, like you handled those vendor invoices." Broussard's smile cut like a blade. "Would be a shame if someone started digging through your files." Cristobal left without another word, his shoes clicking against the tile as he vanished down the hallway. Ritter remained frozen in his chair, staring at the family photo, at the smile that belonged to a woman who never knew what he'd done to save her. Now he would have to sacrifice a friend and mentee to save his job. He only had 8 years left to work. He needed every dime to rebuild all that was lost. That evening, Cherry sat in her car in the campus parking lot watching the office windows shut off one by one. She scrolled through her phone, text drafts, recordings, a half-finished report addressed to the HR director. Her hands trembled slightly as she thought about the risk she was taking. Then she saw a message appear on her screen from an unlisted number. "Stop digging, for Christ's sake." She stared at it, then took a deep breath, tapped delete, and started her car. All week long, Cherry had been assigned late tasks. Petty assignments, odd requests, and urgent, formatting revisions that always landed on her desk just after 4:30 p.m. The kind of work that could have waited but never did. Not when Cristobal Broussard was the one requesting it. Every evening, she remained alone in the administration wing while the building emptied. And every evening, Cristobal would pass by her door, sometimes walking slowly, sometimes not saying a word, sometimes asking unnecessary questions, always watching. It was a game now, a psychological vice. She could feel it tightening. By Friday, her nerves were thin and frayed. She stared at the text from Mike for the 5th time. "We're seated. My mom's upset. You said you'd be here." She closed her eyes. Her phone buzzed again, but she didn't look. On the door behind her, her dress hung from a hook, a midnight, blue satin gown with a plunging neckline and a subtle shimmer. She had never worn anything like it before. The price tag had made her wince. But Mike had said it was a formal anniversary dinner, and for once, she let herself feel pretty. She looked at the clock. 7:28 p.m. The report was done. She clicked send and closed the laptop with shaking hands. Then she sat back in her chair and just stared at the printed wood grain on the desktop of her metal desk. 2 minutes passed. Then, methodically, she stood, shut her door, and unfastened her skirt. She took her top off and folded both items neatly on the desk. From a tote bag by her feet, she pulled out a packet of body wipes, using them to freshen her skin under the dim humming light. She checked her face in camera mode on her phone. Her face looked tired, thin, alert. She turned and reached for the hanger. The dress swayed slightly from the movement of the air as the door opened, swinging wide. Then Cristobal Broussard stood in the doorway, his hand still on the knob. His eyes dropped instantly to regard her figure without apology or hesitation. He smiled. "Well," he said, voice low and slow. "Hope I'm not interrupting something important." Cherry flinched, instinctively stepping back. She was still half-dressed. Her bare arms trembled. "I'm in a hurry," she said sharply. Her voice was tight, precise. "I need to finish dressing," she hissed. She tried to step around him, reaching for the door, for her dress, anything to cover her body, but Cristobal didn't step aside. He leaned slightly into her direction, not touching her, but just enough to block her path. "No rush," he said. "You've worked hard this week. I just wanted to see how that report turned out. Maybe we could go over it together tonight over a late supper. You're already dressed, informally," he said with a grin. Cherry's hand curled into a fist at her side. "I need to go. I am in a hurry," she said more firmly. Her embarrassment was turning into anger. He tilted his head. "You know, Cherry," he touched her hair and twirled a lock around his finger. "You've been tense lately. I'm only trying to help you succeed here. Do you want people to think you are difficult?" She didn't respond. She just stared at him, cold and unwavering. And then, slowly, he stepped back, just enough to regard her from head to toe. She grabbed the dress from the hook and hurried across the hall to the private staff bathroom, locking the door behind her. Cherry dressed in silence, one breath at a time. Her hands shook as she zipped the side seam. She looked at herself in the mirror above the sink. The dress was beautiful, but she felt nothing. She was numb. Cherry stood inside the office bathroom, the dress clinging to her skin like memory. Her breath had slowed, but her pulse hadn't. She could still hear the lock click behind her, could still feel the shape of Cristobal's body in the doorway, the absence of space between them. She waited until the motion sensor night light in the hallway flicked off, plunging the hallway into stillness. Cherry unlocked the bathroom door, stepped out, and ran across the hall to her office. Her eyes scanned the shadows. There was no one there, just empty chairs and a faint humming from the vending machine down the hall. She grabbed her tote, stuffed her folded clothes and wipes inside, snatched up her briefcase, and moved toward the elevator at the far end. The hallway felt longer than usual. When she pressed the call button, Cherry glanced back over her shoulder. There was no one there. The elevator chime rang, and the doors slid open with a reluctant sigh. She stepped in and turned to hit the ground floor button and screamed. Cristobal stood inside, near the panel, half in shadow. She hadn't seen him. Before her voice could rise again, he lunged and shoved her hard against the mirrored elevator wall. His palm clamped over her mouth. "Shh," he whispered softly. His voice was soaked in mock reassurance. "I'm not going to hurt you. I just want to help you succeed," he whispered softly in her ear. Cherry's eyes were wide with terror. Her whole body was rigid next to his. "People are talking, Cherry," he continued, leaning closer, his breath both warm and sour. "They see the way you dress provocatively and the way you flirt with Dean Ritter. The man's still mourning, and you're already trying to use him to get ahead. Have you no mercy?" She shook her head, once hard. Cristobal pulled his hand away. She gasped, drawing air like it was the first time she'd ever needed it. "I didn't. I have a boyfriend," she managed, her voice cracking. "Mike. His name is Mike." Cristobal smiled, like he pitied her. "I see." He pressed closer. "Why not get yourself a man who can actually help you?" His hand slid slowly down her arm, resting at the curve of her hip. His thumb pressed, gently making circles in the satin fabric of her dress possessively. He exhaled, a sound almost like a groan. Then, as suddenly as he began, he stopped. The elevator chimed and came to a stop. Broussard stepped back, smoothing his suit as the doors slid open. His voice turned bright and cheerful. He looked at the janitor sweeping the floor and nodded. He said, "Good night, Miss Turner. Thanks so much for your hard work." He nodded politely, then he walked off the elevator as if nothing had happened. Cherry stood frozen, her bags hanging limp at her sides. The doors began to close again. She stuck her foot out, stopping them, and forced herself forward. Her legs felt hollow. She dropped her briefcase once in the lobby. The sound of it echoed louder than it should have. She picked it up with shaking fingers and rushed to the parking lot, eyes darting from shadow to shadow. She reached her car and fumbled with the keys. Then she looked up. Across the parking lot, near the low brick wall that bordered the property, Cristobal stood, watching her. There was no pretense now, no performance, just stillness and calculation. He didn't move. He didn't smile. He was already planning what came next. An hour later, Cherry sat at the edge of the restaurant table like a ghost. She was late and she was traumatized. The room glowed with candlelight and soft jazz, but her body felt like ice beneath her dress. The scent of wine, seafood, and perfume clung to the air, but she could barely taste anything. Across from her, Mike's parents were smiling, sipping champagne. His sister leaned in with a sly grin. "You're awfully quiet tonight," she said, nudging Cherry's elbow. "Are you pregnant?" Cherry blinked. Her mouth opened, but her brain lagged behind. "What?" "I'm serious," the sister said. "You've got that look. Like, distant but glowy." Cherry forced a laugh. "More like PMS," she mumbled, turning away. Her stomach clenched. Mike caught the exchange and leaned in. "Let's go. You're not okay." Cherry shook her head. "I need some time alone. I'll be fine." He didn't like it, but he didn't push. He didn't know. Not yet. Mike walked Cherry to her car. She drove home and looked around as she walked up the walk. Cherry felt much calmer after she locked the door behind her. Her home smelled like lavender and dish soap. It was clean, quiet, and it was hers. Cherry put her keys in her purse and dropped it on the floor near the couch. She placed her phone on the table, and then went straight to the shower. She stayed under the water longer than she meant to, scrubbing her arms, her ribs, her scalp. Her dress still hung on the bathroom hook, limp and silent like a discarded skin. An hour later, she was on the couch in sweats, watching a rerun of some sitcom she wasn't following. The laughter track buzzed. Her eyes didn't move from the screen. Then came the first knock. It was a sharp, measured sound against the front door. She blinked. The faces on the screen laughed. Then the knock came again, 3, then 4 times. She reached for her phone. It was not on the couch. She checked her bag on the floor. It was unzipped, but there was no phone, no charger. The knocking continued. More insistent now. She moved quickly into the kitchen, flipping on lights. The counters were clean and there was no phone. The knock again, louder, steadier, like the rhythm of a metronome. Cherry stumbled into the hallway, then the bedroom, slamming the door behind her and twisting the lock. She slid down the wall and curled into herself, pressing her fist to her mouth to hold in the sobs. The knocking continued, not for minutes, but for hours. It didn't rage. It didn't scream. It was just there. Knock, knock, knock. Then silence. It was 1 a.m. Cherry didn't remember falling asleep. When she woke, it was 7:03 a.m. Sunlight streamed through the blinds in fine, cruel lines. Her body ached from laying on the hardwood floor. Cherry stumbled into the living room, and there it was. Her phone, sitting perfectly centered on the coffee table, screen down, as if it had never been lost. She froze. Her bag was now on the table, not the floor where she left it. Cherry's hands began to tremble. She moved to the front door. It was still locked. Deadbolt secured. She backed away slowly, scanning the bungalow. The couch pillows were disheveled. Her jacket was on the wrong hook. The bedroom closet door was slightly ajar. It was subtle, but the message was clear. Panic flared, but deeper than that, realization. A crawling, spreading certainty. He had been in her house while she slept. Cristobal Broussard had been in her home. He had her keys. This was no longer just about harassment. This was possession. He wanted complete control of her mind, body, and spirit. There was no place that was safe. She backed into the corner of the room, knees shaking, ball rising in her throat. The bungalow she'd saved for, worked for, built a future in, was no longer safe. She couldn't stay silent anymore. Not one more day. A sour ache sat in Cherry's gut like a stone, but it wasn't fear anymore. It was resolve. By 9 a.m., she had driven across town to a locksmith shop. She needed someone with no affiliation to the college, someone who wouldn't recognize her name. Cherry paid double in cash and refused to answer questions. By late afternoon, every lock on her doors and windows was replaced with reinforced hardware, new deadbolts, and sliding window latches. When the job was done, Cherry stood in the center of her bungalow, door bolted, blinds closed, hands shaking. Then she reached for her phone and paused. She opened her bag. Nothing. Of course, that phone wasn't safe anymore. She looked at her watch. It was 5 p.m. There was still time to drive across parish lines to a prepaid phone shop. She bought a new device and canceled her old number. She wrote down only 5 numbers on a pad and began entering contacts. Mike, her sister, her aunt, and Daisy Gordon, the HR director. That was all she needed for now. She told Mike she needed a couple of days, space to breathe. He didn't understand, but he didn't press. Not yet. But then came the moment she'd never thought would arrive. Cherry stood outside the Acadiana Firearms and Outdoor Supply Store, staring at the words protection for the people painted in red above the doorway. Cherry had signed petitions. She had gone to rallies. She had once debated as senator on public radio about gun control. But that was before the knocking, before the elevator, before the quiet invasion into the heart of her life. Inside, under humming fluorescent lights and the scent of gun oil and leather, she bought a high-voltage stun gun, a canister of pepper spray, and finally, after 15 minutes of quiet conversation and one glance at her eyes, a clerk handed her a small matte black Springfield Armory Hellcat. It's compact, he said, but effective. If you train with it, it will get the job done. She scheduled private training for that afternoon, Sunday morning, and again Monday before work. The instructor looked her over once, didn't ask questions, and nodded. That evening, she packed her new hiking sling like she was going on a solo expedition into unknown territory. In the front pocket, she placed pepper spray phone. Inner compartment held her ID, keys, and her firearm. The bottom sleeve held a portable charger and an extra magazine. Locked in a separate padded safe bag, and she put her old purse, backup documents, old phone, and any paper trail connecting her to the past week. She stashed the bag behind the washer in the laundry room. Then she locked her doors. All of them. Twice. On Sunday morning, she woke early, showered, dressed simply, and reached out to Daisy Gordon, a woman she barely knew from the diversity committee, but one of the few people she could name with a spine at the college. Cherry, texting from new number. Daisy, this is Cherry. I need to talk. In person. Meet me at the library downtown at noon. Daisy texted back yes. Cherry parked at the mall instead of near the library. She left her car near the parking deck entrance. She slipped through the mall's interior, exited through the back near the dumpsters, and walked 3 blocks to the bus stop. Cherry boarded the bus with her hood up. No makeup. Glasses on. She was done being followed. The public library in Town Square was old brick and long windows, a leftover from another era. She found Daisy near the 3rd floor reading room, seated beside a window that overlooked the park. Daisy looked up, surprised. Then, seeing Cherry's face, her expression changed. She didn't ask any questions. Cherry sat, her fingers curled around the edges of her sling. She didn't know where to start, so she said only, "It's about Broussard." Daisy's joy tightened. I thought so. They spoke for 45 minutes, their voices low, their faces still. Daisy confirmed everything Cherry had feared, and more. Cherry wasn't the first, but she was the worst so far. A woman from Student Affairs had tried to file a complaint 2 years prior. She was reorganized, out of her position within weeks. The previous HR director had buried the complaint because the president didn't want trouble. He was waiting for a campaign donation job to open. Cherry sat there looking despondent. Should I talk to Dan? Cherry asked. Dean Ritter? He is useless. He knows about these. But I think he is afraid of Broussard. He won't help you. Cherry's eyes burned. Her mentor was hanging her out to dry. So we're on our own? Daisy nodded slowly. Unless we go outside the college, to the press or file a civil suit. Maybe even the board, but that's riskier. They're Martin's donors. The room felt tighter than before. Cherry stared out the window. Kids were playing by the fountain. A man walked his dog past a row of parked bikes. The world kept spinning. But inside her, something had stopped being afraid. I'm not letting him ruin me, she said. Her voice was a whisper, but it was sharp. I've worked too hard. I've accomplished too much. Daisy looked at her for a long moment, then leaned forward. Then let's stop him. Cherry called in sick on Monday morning. Her voice was soft and weak on the phone, and she timed the call for 8:30 a.m., just late enough for the administrative staff to be in and gossip to spread quickly. Yeah, I need to check something out, she said vaguely. Doctor's visit. OB-GYN. She knew the exact effect those 5 letters would have. She didn't need a real pregnancy test, but she got one anyway. Sat through the quiet fluorescent waiting room at a women's clinic with a clipboard in her lap and no expression on her face. The result was, of course, negative. That wasn't the point. The point was, people talk. And Cristobal listened to talk. She wanted the campus to be distracted. By 1:30 p.m., Cherry was already halfway through a double firearms training session, firing round after round into cardboard silhouettes, tightening her grouping. Her instructor nodded, adjusted her stance, corrected her breath. Cherry didn't flinch anymore, not from the recoil, not from the sound. At 3:15, she walked into the federal EOC office downtown. No disguise, no fear. The building was quiet. The floors were clean. The agent who took her information, Agent Morales, was professional but human. Cherry told her everything. Names, dates, patterns. She showed the voicemail recordings, the anonymous notes, even the building security logs. I don't know the other women, she said, but I need someone neutral. Someone not tied to the campus. Someone who can protect me. Morales nodded and clicked her pen once. We'll open a case today. It is a Title VII violation. I'll enter the formal retaliation clause immediately. You're under protection now, Miss Turner. If they try anything, disciplinary action, demotion, hours manipulation, you let us know. We'll handle it. Cherry left the building feeling lighter and energized. For 2 weeks, she was perfect. Robotic. Focused. She was at her desk early and left on time. Not a minute over. Every report submitted ahead of schedule. No late hours. No excuses. Cristobal didn't stop her in the hallway. He didn't smile anymore. He was waiting for her to slip. She didn't. Mike took Cherry to dinner the following Friday. At the end of the meal, Cherry reached across the table, wrapped her fingers around his, and told him everything. The elevator. The messages. The door knocking. At first, he didn't speak. Then he stood so fast his chair scraped the floor. I'll kill him. No, she said calmly. You won't. I need to do this the right way. You mean legal? Cherry, you think this place is going to protect you. You think the president cares? No, but I don't care about them anymore either. This is about what I need to live with afterward. He sat back down slowly, but something inside them shifted that night. 2 weeks later, Daisy came through with the information EOC needed. She handed Cherry a folded napkin at a bookstore cafe. 3 names, she whispered. One of them still works there. The other 2 left. All 3, same story. Cherry tucked the napkin into her planner without looking at it. Good. She was building something now. A file, an ironclad case. And then the harassment started again. First it was letters. Plain envelopes on her windshield. In her office mail. One slid under her door. Each one typed. No return address. You think this will save you? You're not untouchable. He sees everything. Then there were phone calls at the office. Static. Silence. Breathing. Obscene suggestions whispered through the line. Then the knocking started again. It was Thursday night. Mike sat on her couch after dinner. She felt safe for once. They were watching a movie. She had her legs curled under her and a blanket around her shoulders. Then tap, tap, tap. Mike froze. Cherry sat up straight. The knock came again, slow and deliberate. Mike was at the door in 3 seconds. He yanked it open and ran outside, barefoot and furious. Hey, you want to knock now? Come on. But the porch was empty, the street silent. Cherry followed, stun gun in hand, eyes scanning every bush, every direction. There was nothing, just frigid air and dark windows. 1 month later, Cherry's nerves were fraying. The protection from EOC slowed internal retaliation, but not the external pressure. Broussard was under scrutiny, yes, but he was also cornered. And he was dangerous when cornered. Cherry's relationship with Mike was faltering. He hated being helpless. She hated being watched. Every time the phone buzzed, she jumped. Every car backfire felt like a gunshot. She stopped sleeping through the night. But she kept showing up, to work, to meetings, to her training sessions. Because she knew the pressure was wearing on him too. And it was only a matter of time before he made a mistake. The college was grapevine buzzing. President Martin was aloof and checked out from the moment he was higher. He had finally announced what everyone already suspected. He was running for state senate. The email was brief, perfunctory, and read like a bulleted resume. For most of the campus staff, the announcement was a breath of fresh air. For Cherry Turner, it was a warning bell. Because 2 hours later, Cristobal Broussard made his move. He declared himself acting president. It was just a short campus-wide memo, but it hit Cherry like a blow to the ribs. She immediately texted Daisy, her hands already dialing Agent Morales at the EOC. Within 48 hours, an emergency injunction was filed. The harassment case was already active. There were multiple witnesses, confirmed retaliatory behavior, and evidence of workplace intimidation. The EOC's attorneys moved fast. Broussard was legally barred from assuming any presidential authority. 2 days later, he was gone. The email came from President Martin's office. It cited leadership restructuring. No one said what had happened. No one was allowed to. It was part of the deal. Broussard would walk away with a golden parachute that was twice his salary. Martin had folded to protect his campaign. Martin got to keep his campaign clean. Broussard got to disappear. But Broussard was already planning his next move. 2 days after he stepped down, a call came from Hampton Bay, Virginia. It was an old friend. "There's a job opening," the voice said, "at a private naval academy, dean of the science division. But that's just the public face. The real work, it's under the table and quite lucrative." "Is there a catch?" Broussard asked. "We need someone to act as a surrogate. A tall Creole woman. She doesn't need to know what she's carrying." Cristobal smiled. "I have a cousin. She owes me." He opened his laptop and searched for job listings at Hampton Bay Naval Academy. He found it in less than a minute. It was perfect. By the end of the week, Broussard had listed his house. He was ready to go. That night, for the first time in weeks, Cherry Turner went to sleep without her sling. It sat on the bedside table, neatly packed, her phone on silent. For the first time in months, she slept in a tee, shirt, and shorts, not a sweatsuit and sneakers. She drifted off to the soft murmur of a documentary and the warmth of her bed. She was safe. It was still. Then came the knocking again. It was different this time, sharp, heavy, intentional. Cherry's eyes flew open. Her adrenaline surged. She reached for the sling, but it wasn't on. Her heart thudded as she slipped out of bed, grabbed the strap, and looped it over her shoulder. The knocking was harder now. She slipped out the back window wearing a short pajama set and flip-flops. Cold air bit her skin. She crept around the edge of the house, her heart pounding. A man in black stood at her front door, pounding his knuckles into the wood. However, it wasn't Broussard. She froze. Panic tore through her. She fumbled with her phone and texted Mike. 911, man at door. Not Broussard. Coming around back. She started dialing 911 when her foot caught the garden hose and she tripped. She landed hard on her back on the cold, wet lawn. She screamed as the man jumped off the porch and charged. Cherry reached for the pepper spray. He knocked it from her hand. Then he was on her, a weight crushing her chest. His breath smelled of coffee and blood pressure medication. His hands tried to pin her wrists. Cherry screamed again, clawed at him. Her fingers found the stun gun in her sling. She pressed it to his chest. Then she pulled the trigger. A sound like a dying engine burst through the night. Then there was darkness. Cherry woke to fluorescent lights, rapid movement, and cold metal against her side. She turned her head, wincing. Mike was standing beside her in the emergency room, his eyes red, holding her hand. "Hey," he whispered. "You're okay. You're safe. You did it." She looked across the ER and saw another gurney. It was Dean Ritter. He was unconscious, his face pale and his arms restrained. Cherry blinked. It was him. Mike nodded slowly. "The police think he's been watching you for weeks." Broussard was just the smoke. Ritter was the fire. Her throat tightened with the swell of disappointment. Ritter had been her mentor for years. She felt her pulse pounding in her ears. But then relief descended, real and heavy. It was over. Dean Ritter lay on the gurney, the ceiling lights blurring above him. A heart monitor beeped steadily in the distance. His right wrist was cuffed to the bed rail, a cheap steel bracelet of consequence he hadn't imagined in his worst nights. His body ached, his pride was in ruins, and still he tried to hold on to the memory of that one perfect morning, the day it all should have turned around. It had begun with President Martin's resignation announcement. Ritter, like everyone else, read it on his phone in bed, cold coffee in one hand, thin sunlight slicing across the room. For the first time in months, he slept through the night. No nightmares. No shadows. That same morning, he dressed carefully, pressed shirt, clean shave, and a tie he hadn't worn in years. Outside the college, the maintenance crew was pulling weeds and edging the lawn. Ritter stopped to nod at them. Looking sharp, Dean, one said. New season, Ritter replied with a small smile. New start. He believed that until he reached his office and his assistant stood, fidgeting. President Martin wants to see you. Now. The smile on his face faded. Inside the presidential suite, Daisy Gordon, the HR director, sat with her hands folded calmly. The college council looked away. President Martin, ever the slippery politician, gave a thin, lipped nod. There won't be charges, Martin said, but we can't keep you on. What? Ritter's voice cracked. I've served this institution. There's evidence, Daisy said flatly. You know what I'm referring to. Ritter's hands gripped the arms of the chair. Broussard. Broussard is gone. But before he left, he turned over documents showing how you covered your tracks. Diversion of funds. Forged audit logs. He looked at Daisy. You believe him? She looked back at him, eyes hard. I believe the files. I believe the time-stamped edits to the procurement system. I believe the victim you chased across her yard. Ritter's breath caught. Martin raised a hand. You're being terminated for malfeasance. No prosecution, no press. This institution's name does not need more blood on it. Ritter didn't argue. He knew it wouldn't matter. The vultures were already circling. Cristobal Broussard, 2 weeks earlier, had already set the trap. He couldn't touch Cherry Turner, not anymore. She was protected federally, locally, and politically. The board had buried the early reports. The campus community knew her name now, whispered it with admiration. So he turned on Ritter. He had handed a thick folder to his assistant as he walked out on his final day with a crisp suit and smug grin. Mail this for me, sweetheart, he said with a wink. She rolled her eyes and dropped it in the interoffice bin. Inside, every audit discrepancy, every forged code log, photocopies of Ritter's secret transfer forms, and one personal note. If I go down, Dan goes with me. He had trouble keeping his hands clean. CB. As Broussard left Bayou State College, he clapped his hands and whistled. The air was thick with summer heat and finality. The hunt had been good. He had his fill, young assistants, quiet secretaries, overlooked temps. He fed where the system let him, and the system ignored his actions because it was inconvenient and the women were powerless. Broussard's only regret, he never got to break Cherry Turner. She was not only ambitious, but she was also smart and strong. When Martin caved to Broussard's demands, Crystal saw the impact. Cherry was terrified, anxious, vulnerable, ripe for the picking. Another week, maybe 2, and she'd have folded. But the plan fell apart, and it made him furious. So he gave her someone else to fear. If Cherry hadn't reported anything, if she hadn't kept digging, none of this would have come to light. Dean Ritter, like Broussard, had harbored dark thoughts in the quiet. Not of seduction, but of revenge. Cherry Turner had ruined Broussard. He in turn would her mentor. Ritter had only taken money to save his wife. That wasn't corruption, it was love. But love was gone now, as was his job, his title, and his legacy. So Ritter went to Cherry's house that night not to threaten, but to vent. To show her the damage she'd done. To make her feel guilt. When he saw her by the porch, sneaking around in fear, it enraged him. She looked at him like he was some kind of monster, and he snapped. Now he lay on the gurney, staring at the flickering ceiling light, trying to piece it together. The stun gun flash. The siren wail. Mike's yelling voice. Cherry's sobbing breath. All of it replayed in his head like a cursed dream. He would face no trial. He would fade into whispers, his name erased quietly from the college's directory. But he knew this. They would always remember what Cherry Turner did not break. For weeks after the attack, Cherry Turner walked through the college's administration building with a new stride. She no longer flinched at echoes in the hallway. Her smile was real, small, but present. She wore soft flats instead of steel, toed war boots, and her bag, while still organized, no longer held a weapon. It held prenatal vitamins and a small notebook labeled plans. She was pregnant. It had happened fast. A shock, really. On the final day of the cabin getaway she and Mike had taken after the attack, she'd sat on the edge of the tub staring at the second pink line and feeling, still. Mike had cried when she told him. Happy tears. Then, as the fire crackled in the fireplace, he reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a modest ring in a leather box, and said, I guess this makes good timing. They didn't announce it right away. It was theirs for a moment, safe, untouched by paperwork, gossip, or fear. Cherry returned to work not with armor, but with direction. She accepted the congratulatory smiles without shrinking. She wore her bump like a symbol. I'm still here. I'm growing something new. Her promotion came quietly, passed across the desk of the interim dean like a sealed envelope in a spy film. You've earned it, her boss said. More than anyone I know. She accepted it with grace, but didn't celebrate. Not yet. Her celebration came in different forms now. Safe sleep, shared dinners, a calendar she wasn't afraid to write in. And Daisy was now more than an ally. She was a friend. They had lunch every Wednesday. Talked about office politics, nursery colors, and whether to trust the new HR director. Answer, not yet. They were building something. Brick by brick. A quiet sisterhood born from fire. 100 miles away, Cristobal Broussard stepped off a private flight into a different kind of winter. The air in Hampton Bay, Virginia, was crisp and briny, smelling of water, pine, and old money. He wore a long wool coat, fine leather gloves, and sunglasses despite the clouded sky. His friend, Jared Morgan, met him at the tarmac in a black Range Rover, a manila folder already waiting in the back seat. Broussard thumbed through the pages as they drove and looked at the photo of his prey. It was Taylor Chancellor. She was a former Navy officer. She was intelligent, beautiful, and a graduate student. She was married to Chance Chancellor, a decorated captain turned professor with far too much money. He was a self-made millionaire. She's the weak point? Broussard asked, eyes still on the photo of the lovely woman. His friend grinned. She's the lever. He's the vault. And the surrogate project? We just need the right face. Tall Creole, his friend said. Broussard nodded. He already had someone in mind, his cousin, a statuesque beauty from Baton Rouge who owed him 3 favors and a silence clause. He flipped the last page of the dossier. Then he looked out the window as they passed the gates of the Hampton Bay Naval Academy, where the Dean of Science's position had just opened due to unexpected retirement. Broussard had already applied. His resume was impeccable. His references altered. His reputation sealed. Plenty of fresh meat here, he muttered. His friend smirked and said, hungry much. Broussard smiled slowly and licked his lips. Always. He proclaimed. Jill Chancellor had it all, a luxury home, a beautiful wife, and tons of money. Broussard was ready to move to a new level of luxury and power. He would have it all once Taylor became his. This ends our story. Thanks for stopping by. We invite you to like this story and subscribe to this channel. Be sure to stop by for more stories each week. You can find the Hampton Bay books at online book retailers. For more information about the Hampton Bay series, visit DeniseNicholsBooks.com.